All discussions and interactions are meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. They're not intended to breach the ATA Code of Conduct, single out any student or educator, or diminish professional integrity in any way. I'm Conrad Drover. Join me as I sit down with inspiring professionals from diverse fields to gain valuable insight from their experiences and knowledge to help me grow as both an educator in the classroom and as a person in all areas of my life. This is Professional Development. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm joined by Ben Porter. He's a science, math, and sports medicine teacher in Southern Alberta, and he's currently in his 5th year of teaching. In this episode, we talk about Ben's transition from teaching in a private school to teaching in a public school, the difference in teaching dynamics, the unique challenges of high academic courses. We also dive into classroom management, building relationships with students, and the evolving expectation placed on teachers beyond the classroom. Ben shares his perspective on teacher compensation, balancing personal health with teaching responsibilities, and his own fitness journey. Also, we explore the broader role of educators, going beyond academics, to support students' emotional and personal growth. If you guys enjoy this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps this podcast grow. Now, let's dive in. Ben Porter.
How you doing?
Good. Yeah, that's happy Friday. Happy Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you expecting a crush from your crush today?
Probably not, but I am gonna buy my wife some cow eyes today.
Cow eyes.
Yeah, I'm picking them up actually for the students. We're doing a cow eye dissection after the break. So.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. I thought, man, you'd probably been in Alberta for too long. So tell me about that. We're both in small town Alberta, but we're both not from here.
Mm-hmm.
So do you just want to tell me about your upbringing, your schooling, and just sort of the basis points of how you got here?
Yeah. So I'm originally from, I guess, like a medium-sized town in Nova Scotia, Truro, Nova Scotia. I spent, I don't know, probably 90% of my life there. Graduated high school. Then I went to the University of New Brunswick, where I completed my Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology degree. And then I went to a small liberal arts university, also in Fredericton, called St. Thomas University, to do my education degree. And then my wife and I at the time, we were just kind of ready to make a change, and we both kind of wanted to work right away. And at that point, she had made the decision not to be a teacher.
Right.
But, I knew that I wanted to get started right away. I didn't want to play around on the sub list. So I moved to Alberta to get started. I was teaching at a small private school. That was my first job. So
wow, yeah, it's very similar how we started. We wanted to skip the subbing, and I don't know if maybe subbing would have been good, just to get a feel of it. But yes, I wanted that full-time job. Get in, you see an opportunity where people are not getting or too afraid to make the move and stuff. So you just go for it and sort of get a head start in your career.
Yeah.
That's sort of it.
Yeah, that was it. I didn't really feel like I watched my wife graduated from her education degree a year before me, so I kind of heard the good, the bad, and the ugly from her about what substitute teaching could be like, and I really didn't want. If I didn't have to do that, I didn't want to have to do it. So kudos to all the subs out there that go through that process, or all the people and all the teachers that have gone through that. I don't know if I'd still be in the same position today if I had to go through that.
And I find it's especially now, subs are the most one of the most valuable assets that any school division has.
Yeah.
Or doesn't have, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Consistently here at our school, we're constantly having to cover for each other. And, we're in a smaller school division, but we're literally right outside one of the largest cities in Canada.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's funny to see that we're struggling for subs.
Yeah. And I think that's a Alberta-wide thing. That. How long have you been teaching for? What's the time?
I guess I've been teaching for 5 full years now at this point. Started teaching in August of 2019, and yeah, we're in the 2024 year, so this would be my 5 full years, so 5.5 years now.
Right. Yeah. So you're just a couple months behind me.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like, and you've told me this before, but like you've worked in a private school.
Hmm.
Um, Before I even get into like what's it like working in a private school, I feel like some people don't have an understanding of what private school is, especially in Alberta, because it is different in like Manitoba, where I'm from. So could you explain like how private school and public school are set up in Alberta and what is like the key differences, just to explain to someone who has no idea what it is?
Yeah, I mean, like the two systems are like they're parallel. They run parallel. We all follow the same curriculum, but I find there's a lot more flexibility in what we can do, with maybe resources that we use and how we do it
In private school?
in private school. Yeah, um, like and I mean, decisions get made a lot quicker too, because you don't have to make decisions at like a school division. It's just usually a board
Hmm.
of like 5 or 6 people that
Yeah.
get into a room and make decisions. So, that's a blessing and a curse.
Like when I think private school, I think of like uniforms
Mm,
and uh, multiple thousands of dollars tuition fees. Uh, but from my understanding, living in Alberta, there's sort of like a range or a spectrum of different types of private schools.
yeah. So, from my understanding of it, and I don't know if I have the full picture of it, you can be deemed a private schools are supposed to be not for profit.
Hmm.
But what that looks like can be very different. So, for example, you can look at some of the largest private schools in Alberta who are charging, $20,000 tuition fees. So, as long as they spend all that money, they're technically they're a not-for-profit school,
Hmm.
right? So they're not supposed to be making a profit off of this, like off of the tuition. It's just how they allocate their funds and how they allocate their money. And yeah, you're right. Like, you do get schools that have like a wide range of tuition. There's the $20,000 school tuition, and then there's the private school that I taught at, where the high school tuition was $800 for the year. So there's definitely a very wide range. And actually, my private school, I believe, typically operated at a loss,
Okay.
and was brought up by the owners who owned another business.
Okay. So yeah, it's more definitely a little more capitalism put in there, right?
Yeah.
But the non-for-profit status like means like I don't know. It's I have a lot of skepticism when it comes to private schools because our deliverables are almost intangible by nature. Like they're standardized testing,
Hmm.
right? But our clientele sort of dictates that. And
Yeah.
like, I was just wondering how that like incentive structure and like, being in a private field, how do they like wage like salaries and like how do they determine success if it's not like a publicly funded thing?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of like any sort of corporation, it's kind of what the value that you bring.
Right.
And that was very evident.
I guess how do they gauge that value though?
Yeah. A lot of it was how well were you liked, what kind of things you brought to the table, how valuable you were to the team. All those sort of things played into factors like salary.
Yeah.
Um, so like, and you knew if you were on the outs,
Right.
right? Or you knew that, you probably were not going to be offered a contract back like the next year after,
Right.
um, just based off of how the interactions went with, the higher ups, in the school.
I feel like that just adds like a lot of unnecessary stress to an educator.
Yeah. And I would argue also, though, that it keeps you sharp.
Right.
If you food, water, shelter,
Hmm.
right? And at the time, like, for if you go the private school route, like, you're still it's a job, right?
Right.
It's just like in the public education,
Mm.
you're looking for food, water, shelter, and in this way, I would argue, in some ways, it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you sharp because you have to perform. You have to be at the top of your game as a teacher. There's less, I guess, grace there.
Mm.
So in that way, like, that can be very difficult and very much wear you down. But it forces you to make sure that your practice is good.
Right. Yeah. Like it's something I never had experience with, but one thing that in university when I was looking at private schools, I think that there's a lot of and correct me if I'm wrong here because again I have my perception on private schools is higher end. I feel like that's the only thing in Manitoba that private schools like naturally like artificially have a selection bias of of clientele. So students usually come from affluent families, or they are have some sort of gifted status where they can have scholarships or different fundings for them. There's lots of selection bias that goes on that skews test results to make private schools per- perceived to run better as a school or higher academic outcomes, when in reality, I think a lot of that has to do with the selection bias. And since public schools are sampling from the public, right, that
Hmm.
there's naturally going to be a larger standard deviation.
Yeah, 100%. For the most part, I agree with that
Yeah.
statement. At the private school that I was at, I actually would disagree with that because
Okay.
we had a lower tuition, because we had things like, you could make monthly payments, like spreading over. I know for some families, and that spending $800 over the course of a school year is, that's a huge burden. But when you think about whether or not it's the difference if you go public or private, well, sometimes that's the cost of minor hockey, right? In some ways, that's a lot of ways, it's cheaper than putting your kid in hockey,
Right. Yeah.
right? To send them to the private school that I was at. So I would say at my school, that wasn't always the case. Yes, there still was an interview process. Yes, you know, we probably didn't have the resources to deal with some of the more complex kiddos. So yeah, there was a selection bias, because ultimately, like, it came down to what's actually better for your child,
Mhm.
to come to a private school where we don't have the resources to support your child, or to go to the public education where, yeah, I know that they don't also have money to support it, but there's a little bit more push there because it's a publicly funded
Mhm.
place. So it's kind of like, you have to, right? You have to provide these
And I think
things.
it's just self-evident that there like has to be parent involvement in the private school.
Yeah, the parent involvement is huge. The parent voice is very large and very loud.
'Cause
Um,
it's not a passive decision
no.
to send your kid to private school. Like a parent would have to have actively thought about that and been invested in some way, shape, or form. Which
Yeah.
unfortunately, like in the off case scenarios in public school, you see that some parents just aren't involved.
Hmm. And I as teachers, we often say too, it's like it's a double-edged sword. We want parent involvement. We want parents to be engaged with their child at home about their learning. And we want that, right? It's good for the child.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, I know sometimes as teachers we shy away from parents as
Oh
well,
yeah, no, they're scary.
right?
But
And they are scary. One of my biggest fears is sometimes getting a negative parent email at night. But
well, isn't it funny? We can talk to like 30 little people
yeah.
like all day, like have the confidence, and then another adult comes in and like that sort of stage fright comes back. You find,
Hmm.
eh?
Well, it's yeah, it's just hard to remember sometimes. It's like when we got these 30 little kids in front of us, that this is somebody's child.
Yeah,
This is somebody's everything,
yeah.
right? So I get it from the parent's perspective because, I myself am a parent, and I'm slowly starting to realize this. And, there's been my son's at preschool, and, there's been some small problems that I'm just like, well, maybe it is time to email the
Yeah.
teacher of the preschool. Not that it's a big deal, like,
No, but you're
but
sending your child off for 8 hours a day,
to be cared
and
for by another
especially
adult.
if you're not a teacher, like you have the luxury of being a teacher, sort of having an idea what's
Mm.
going on in class. But uh, a parent that's not a teacher, not in the field, there's a lot of faith. Like you're just sending the kid off for 8 hours a day, and I talked about this in another podcast, is the only perception or perspective that a lot of people have about school is their own like anecdotal experience with it, right? And that's something not a lot of other professions have,
Yeah.
right? Because like um, not everyone has like been in like a court of law for 8 hours a day growing up
Mhm.
and then has seen a lawyer work,
Yeah.
right? So everyone has like a front row seat and a bias of their own perspective, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since like now you're in public,
Mhm.
why the change and what do you see differently? Both like let's say like contract wise and
Mhm.
just everyday classroom wise.
Yeah, so I guess the reason for the switch was at the time, the private school that I was at, they had talked about getting charter status, and charter status means that there's a little bit more consistency at the pay grid, a little bit more consistency in benefits, maybe a slightly better bump in benefits. But at the time when I made the decision to leave, that was unclear. And I had 2 kids at the time. I just had my wife was pregnant with my second child. And I was like, look, it'd be really nice to have some security here. There was no pension.
Right.
So that's why I was like, it was time to make the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a couple other factors as well. I think I alluded to it earlier. It's like, working in a private school can be very exhausting.
Right.
It's tiring. It's demanding. I can remember getting text messages from administration, um, you know, on our teacher group chat,
Right.
uh, you know, asking us to complete stuff, and it would be after hours. And I'm like, this is crazy, right? Like, and so that, like, just all of those factors, like, kind of where it's like, okay, I think it's time that I move on, and not in a negative way. It's just more of like, no, I'm feeling myself becoming increasingly bitter with this current system, and I don't want to be that because I actually love what I do. It's time for me to make that change. And
Mm.
I wasn't going to force myself to stay in a situation that I knew long term that I wasn't going to be happy in. And so that's why I decided to make the jump over to the public system. And that's ultimately where I wanted to be anyways. I often looked at my private school experience as I guess, sort of a stepping stone in my career. It was not going to be my forever home. At some point, the move was going to be
A
made.
character building
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really good. I had some amazing leadership experience. Like, I got to be an athletic director for 2 years.
Right.
I was a valued member of the team. Like, the administration, did value me. There's a reason why I was there for 4 years, right? Like, and why I kept getting contracts and stuff. So it was really good that way. But it was just time to make the move. And so I guess, like, one of the biggest differences that I see would be, like, as far as, like, actual take-home dollar value, I actually, when I first made the jump, and I don't know if that's the case now, or what that would compare to now,
Yeah.
but I actually brought home less.
In the private.
Yeah, in public.
In public.
In
Okay.
public, my
Yeah.
monthly take-home was going to be less.
So they think like 11% of it just goes right into your pension.
Yeah.
Or not. Yeah. Pension, right?
Yeah,
Retirement.
so it was like all those value, so my first year was like, I was not making as much money, but however, there's the security that comes with being a public educator, right? There's the benefits. There's, we have a collective agreement and an ATA that will
Right.
protect us, and that will, that it keeps all parties that are involved, like, in the public system, accountable.
Yeah.
Where, in the other system, there was really it was like a really much said like a one-sided.
Right.
Um,
And like some people argue, it's like, oh, like again, like anti-union folk would usually like talk about, hey, this stuff, this cushioning that you have with this collective agreement, it's going to make people lazy or whatever. It's like I've heard it all from my blue collar family, but my perspective is that it allows you, like, because like always fighting for your job or what's going to be the next contract, it increases cortisol and you're going to be stressed. And I find in this profession, you're presenting, you have 5 jobs
Yeah.
a day, right?
Well, and I would also say it's like,
Like, how can you do the job when you're constantly stressed out?
well, exactly too. And I would honestly say, like, yeah, like I talked about, the stress of being a private educator and like having to be on your game. But I would also argue it's like, as a public educator, it looks much different. You still have to be on your game, but it looks different.
Right.
You're differentiating, 5, 6 times for a single lesson. You're doing all these different things, where in the public or in the private system, you're still doing a little bit of that differentiation, but it's not nearly as much.
It's more heavy curriculum.
It's more heavy curriculum. It's more, standardized.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing that I noticed the difference of. It's just, it's hard work in a different way.
Yeah.
Because, like, I know, like, some of the people that we work with here, I would say, are some of the hardest working individuals that I honestly have ever worked with in my life. And that's just not the case, like, in the private system. Like, I would say my colleagues here work much harder.
Okay. That's interesting. It's almost like counterintuitive to sort of what people think, right?
Mm-hmm.
You did mention that you were an athletic director.
Yeah.
What do they even do, and like, why aren't you that now?
So I would actually say I had it better as an athletic director than what I currently see our current athletic directors have. I was given
So
I've been on
before you start that, what is an athletic
Okay,
director?
so an athletic director, you're typically overall responsible for athletics. So like you would go to like meetings, you would plan, like with the leagues, like tournaments, games, all this other stuff. You would look after all the equipment, jerseys, fees. Um, you're just overall responsible for the athletics department, really,
So like a
essentially.
team manager, but for all the teams of the school.
Yeah, essentially. And
Traveling, bus booking,
yeah,
stuff
all
like
that
that.
stuff, like you were responsible for that.
Yeah.
Um, communicating with coaches, communicating to administration and the board, all those different hats that I had to wear.
You must get a lot of extra money doing all those extra jobs.
Well, and that's why I say I actually would say when I was at the private school, they had it just a little bit better there,
Yeah.
because I did actually receive an addition to my salary, um, for being that athletic director, and I also received, from what I have observed, like I had two athletic director preps given to me throughout my week, right? Where I believe our current athletic director only has one additional prep, and I believe they just got it this semester. I'm not totally sure, but
Right. But that's typically what I've seen in other schools, that they usually get another prep to do their
yeah,
job. So you're full classroom now.
yeah, full classroom.
Right. What subjects are you teaching now?
Got a little bit of mix. High school math and science. So like currently grade 8 science. I did 30-2 math. I'm currently doing 10-3 math. Doing high school sports medicine, which I love. That's super cool.
So a lot of stuff, and
Yeah.
what I see there is a lot of range.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that because in terms of the higher academic high school courses, those are extremely difficult to me.
hmm
But it seems like you have a huge range. So could you explain sort of like the streaming setup for math and science in Alberta?
So, like typically, like in your math, like it goes 10, 20, 30. So 10 would be your grade 10s, 20 would be your grade 11s, 30 would be your grade 12s. And then you have like 20-1, 20-2. So your -1, that's like your higher level, like your advanced math. Your 20-2 would be like your standard like academic math. And then like if you were taking a -3 course, that would be, I guess, your workplace readiness kind of math,
Mhm.
or like if you were interested in setting up your own business, like those kind of mathematics that we'd be teaching.
I actually love that entire curriculum.
Yeah, it's a great curriculum.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying teaching it. And then with the sciences, it's just 10, 20, 30, but typically that's where you would see like your bio 20s, your bio 30s. So your grade 11 bio, your grade 12 bio, physics 20, physics 30, chem 20, chem 30. And these are like all considered like -1 courses.
Right.
You can take, Alberta does have science 10, 20, and 30, like your standard level, where it gives you a
You
mix
guys
of
all science.
yeah, like your general science all across the board. But we don't have that here at our school. I believe they do offer it online.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of like a general overview of the stream.
And then there's like science 14 and 24.
Yeah, there's science 14 and 24 as well.
Yeah. So the 14s and 24s, because we both taught them,
Yeah.
they are, I guess, the equivalent of like math 10-3, like a
Yep.
more trades orientated, practical approach to
Mhm.
science. And because you're teaching high level chemistry, or you have taught it,
I taught it, yeah.
and you've taught like science 14. I find the clientele's different in those lower stream courses,
Mhm.
or I hate even saying lower stream, but just like
It's a different
the
stream.
more practical
Yeah.
course, right? But they have different clientele,
Yep.
with different set of needs and supports that you need to give them. As a teacher, what are the biggest struggles in each?
It's yeah. I think like for the 1424s or the dashes, the workplace readiness courses.
Mhm.
I guess it would just be, showing them the value of what hard work actually is, because some of them still just need to learn that a little bit. Some of them have it and they grasp it. Um, but I'd say the biggest part is like honestly classroom management.
Mhm.
Hey, get this done. Hey, having the conversations of, look, you're gonna go work here in a couple of years. Like, I know that this is science, but the skill of you still need to get this done applies, right? If you don't get this done, like what's going to happen? It's like teaching like those life skills,
Mm-hmm.
like those life skills and those soft skills kind of alongside the curriculum. It's a little bit more of a blend where it's not just about the curriculum. It's about like um,
The R word.
yeah,
Relationship.
yeah, yes,
Yes.
yeah, it's that relationship piece. And the relationship piece in the higher levels is definitely important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess the needs of those academic kiddos is they I find it's a lot more reassurance of, no, like, you get this, like, no, you can do this. Like, yeah, it's hard, but you can do this. You'll get there. It's a lot more of like support that way. Um, or they'll need like sometimes like kids will come to you and be like, hey, like, can you break this really complex concept down into its basics for me? Which sometimes is a really hard thing to do as a teacher because sometimes we just be like, well, this is the way it is. It's
Right.
like, but that's not
Especially
actually
if you're good at it.
right. And it's like that, but that's not actually helpful, right? So it's like finding ways and methods to like really break complex topics down and be like, and just I guess just break it down for you.
Yeah.
And that would be the biggest difference that I need or that I see in the needs.
Like when I've taught those courses, I always think like relationships is the number one thing because you want to make them appreciate school. And I've had the privilege of working with a lot of Indigenous students in those like streamed courses like Science 14. And when I'm working with that group in particular, it's really imperative that I think about the reasons why they may not value school, right? There has been generational distrust in the school system. And as a teacher, like you're like, how do I get them back? Right? How do I make them value this? Because it's not it's probably not valued well in their home.
Yep.
It's probably not valued in their everyday life. So why would you work hard on anything if you didn't value it?
Well, and I think also too, it's like it could be just a built up of negative experiences with the system too, right? So it's like trying to find ways to motivate them to finish the work and just find ways to motivate and to make the work that you're doing relatable to them. And I think that's honestly half the battle, right? It's the relationship piece, right?
Yeah, and I think science and math, like you can relate it to. Like there's something you can bring to the table that they go, oh, hey, like that's me.
Yeah.
Right. For the higher academic courses, and I've known you've experienced this, and I want to know it, is like sometimes in education, and this is maybe something people don't know, is that you can get thrown a course like the day before the semester starts, and you have to like just wing it, and that gets the difficulty of that compounds, I feel, when it's a very high academic course.
Yeah.
So could you explain a situation like that you were in, and like how do you deal with such a high academic course that maybe you're not 100% specialized in, but now you have the pressure of teaching it to very highly academic kids that will call you on your stuff. And like every teacher has a bit of imposter syndrome. How is that amplified?
Yeah, I mean, it happened last year. I can easily think of the example last year where 3 days into semester 2 to teach Math 30-2, and I have a science degree, but it's in kinesiology, so math is not something that was super a part of my degree. I think I have 4 or 5 math heavy courses in my graduate degree. So, in my undergraduate degree. So, yeah, I was given this course like 3 days into the semester. So they already had a really negative start to their semester, because they didn't have a teacher. And then this guy who's brand new to the school shows up and decides to take the course on. And you kind of have to go from it of the approach of you have to be willing to work hard, right? You have to be willing to grind it out yourself, just like as the kids grind. Because if the kids see you working through the problems and trying to figure things out, there's probably going to be a certain level of frustration there with them. They're going to get frustrated with it because oftentimes they expect teachers, most of the time, just to be able to riddle off answers.
We know everything.
We're supposed to know everything all the time. And, that's not the case. We're humans too.
Right.
Especially if you're somebody young like myself who's, taking on a diploma course for the first time in an area that's not really my specialty. Yeah, like there's a lot of hard work there. I can remember spending, well, every single night, I would spend an hour reviewing the lesson. I'd go through the lesson myself and make sure that I went through 80 to 90% of the examples and 80 to 90% of the questions that we were going to cover that day. Honestly, my only saving grace was that the kids are given a math workbook,
Hmm.
and then that workbook has a teacher key.
Right.
And then I also had an incredible colleague that I taught beside that, I could go and
Just walk over the room. Hey,
well,
can
yeah,
you answer this?
or like, hey, like I'm having a hard time with this, and
Yeah.
like how would you approach this question? Like I tried it this way, and it didn't seem to work out, and we talk about it, and you know, I just like we ask our students to go into things with a growth mindset, right? We ask our students to try the hard thing, and really tried to amplify that with my kids. I tried the hard thing. I'm doing the hard thing. Look at me, like work hard. This is what you
Leading
guys
by example.
yeah, trying to really lead by example. And if kids can smell um, a lack of authenticity from a mile away,
Like sharks.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's no point in trying to fake it, right? So if a kid asks a hard question, answer honestly. I'd say, I actually don't have a solution for you right this second. That this is a good question. Let me sit down and try and figure this out. Let me go find the answer for you, because that's what we would ask them to do,
Yeah.
right? We would ask them to do the exact same thing. So we just model that.
And I was gonna ask you like about how you build effective relationships, but I feel like what you're just talking about really like how like you're not friends with students, but you're friendly with students.
Mhm.
But I think that relatability that like you talking to them like, hey, I'm a person. We're gonna figure this out together.
Mhm.
Is that one of the ways that you build that relationship?
Yeah, 100%. Like that's really important for me. I need my students to see me as human. Yeah, I'm the person in front of the room. Ultimately, there's certain things that have to happen in a classroom, but really, like that, establishing those effective relationships goes miles for success in the classroom as a teacher and for the students as well.
Right. In terms of like the systematic structure of public school and just school in general,
Mhm.
do you think the expectations have increased in our teaching profession?
Oh, 100%. Um, Teachers wear 5 or 6 different hats. We're counselors, we're educators, we're parents, we're, paper pushers, we're
Presenters, researchers.
researchers, we're all of these things, and um, our expectations of what we do are high. And I would argue rightfully so. What we do is important,
Right.
right? We're preparing the next young minds in Alberta and in Canada to move forward and to take our country and our province forward, right?
Right.
So it's a big deal.
I have to ask this. I have to ask this because it's something that comes up a lot. Is like, so our pay structure as teachers, we're salaried. It's usually like 200 days and it's divided into
Mhm.
12 paychecks. With all these extra things, extra hats that we wear,
Mhm.
including extracurriculars, do you think maybe it's time for a restructuring of how we're compensated? And I'm thinking like overtime pay for coaching and
Mm.
all that stuff. Like I know there's specific stuff that just it's not practical,
Mm.
but like what are your thoughts on eventually moving to like an overtime for coaching? Do you think that would increase like engagement? Do you think it would help our school system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've got mixed opinions of it. I think it depends on the perspective of the school that you're at,
Mhm.
and if it's an expectation
Right.
by the division. Um, I coach badminton because I love it.
Right.
This is not a it's not an extra thing for me. It's something that I love. It's something that I enjoy. It it's something that gets me out of bed
Mhm.
in the morning. I don't want to be compensated for that time.
Right.
I do it purely for the joy of watching the kids go out and compete, have success. And Would it be a nice gesture? Absolutely, I think so.
Hmm.
I mean, we're seeing some coaches now be compensated a little bit, at least for travel,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I mean, but we can be
Yeah.
compensated for travel.
Yeah. But we're
Uh,
volunteers.
ultimately we're volunteers, but so is so much of our, I guess, our system
Right.
outside of here. I think as soon as we start doing that, I think we have to start offering compensation for everybody. And my argument would be, if you don't want to do something in your time you want to spend with your family, and it should be, you should
Right.
want to spend time with your family. I want to spend time with my family. Eventually, I want to have my kids in badminton, and if it comes down to coaching school badminton and taking my kids to their badminton, yeah, I'm going to choose my family
Right.
every single time,
So.
or coaching at my kids' school versus coaching at my current school. I'm going to choose my kids' school
Hmm.
because family will come first. My kids are not at that age yet.
Yeah.
Um, but they will be shortly. My son's about to enter kindergarten next year, and yeah, I plan on being more involved.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it's
exciting.
it's super cool. So yeah, my what I do here at the school will change.
So
Yeah.
what I'm getting from is like, yeah, it's fine to have like that volunteer model
Mhm.
because that's so much of what we do in our everyday lives. We volunteer. It just I feel like the expectation has to match that,
Yeah, I don't think it should be an expectation.
right?
I think it.
Sometimes it feels like it's an unspoken expectation,
Oh, I
especially if
100.
you're like probationary
Yeah.
or
Oh, like,
like
especially if you're on,
current.
like, that temp contract or you're on a probationary contract, yeah, you definitely feel that pressure to do a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, like,
No.
I would love to do it and, like, it's part of the grind,
Yeah.
but, it just systemically, I'm thinking, like, there is a deficit in getting these volunteers,
Yeah.
and it's not so much of a selfish thing I'm thinking of, it's how do I get more people
Yeah.
into this?
And then this is where I would say is, like, if we want all these things, if parents want all these things, then people in the community need to step up, you know? Um, if there's a gap to fill, and parents have. At our school this year, we have a lot of parent coaches this year, and I know that, yeah, there's definitely a lot more parent coaches this year than there are staff coaches,
Right.
from what I've observed. Like, you still have to have a teacher sponsor.
Like, I think it's awesome that we're giving our
Yeah.
time, doing that, and I think we all should consider that work-life balance just because
Mhm.
it's for health. Both of us being, in the kinesiology realm,
Yeah.
we know how to be fit. We know how to be healthy.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's harder to practice what we
Oh,
preach.
man, so hard.
Yeah. So I know you've had like a journey in terms of weight loss and fitness.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so I guess, like, I reached the point, like, where I guess context is both my parents have always struggled with obesity. Like, there's just that. So there's a certain I don't have good eating habits. I just don't. So there was a time in my life where I actually was about 265 pounds. Um, and then I was like, nope, this is not what I want. I've got a young son. Like, my wife had just given birth to our son, and I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. So I started exercising and dieting quite intensely. I don't know if you want me to speak to the specifics of what exactly I did.
Well, like, yeah, share like some of the stuff you did.
Yeah. So I guess I did this. I guess it's technically classified as a fad diet, called intermittent fasting. And I started out, like, there is a lot of research backed, and good data to support intermittent fasting. And I would say, like, out of all the fad diets, it's probably one of the more researched ones. And if done correctly, it's very successful, and I can actually, uh, you know,
Attest to it.
attest to
Yeah.
that. But there are some dangers with it as well. So what I did is I did intermittent fasting, and then I also did calorie counting as well. Um, and I started out with, like, I did 16:8, and then I did 18:6. And these are, like, eating windows. So
Yeah.
it's an hour's fasting, 6 hours of, like, eating window. And then, yeah, so, like, numbers on the scale started to drop. They dropped fast.
Hmm.
And now that I'm on this side of things, so I lost about 100 pounds in about 10 months.
That's good.
It's great,
Yeah,
but also like when you think about how much when you actually sit down and you do the math, that's not a normal amount of weight to lose.
no, it's pretty extreme.
Yeah, that's very extreme. And I would say that I probably at the time when I reflect back on it was maybe dealing with, I guess, low key like eating disorder.
Yeah, disordered eating
It
anyway.
was disordered eating, and
Yeah.
I got so focused on the number on the scale that at some point I was even doing like 22 too. So like 22 fasting window, 2 hour eating window. So it's only doing like one meal a day essentially, and I would get all of my calories in one sitting or within 2 hours,
Right.
right? And yeah, like I actually eventually got down to about 160 pounds, which is about, if you look at BMI,
Yeah.
I mean, we both know the arguments, the health pros and cons. It's a good guide.
Yeah.
It's an okay guide.
Right.
Right?
More for populations. Like
Yeah.
BMI was designed to measure like population health, not individual health, but we always use it as like a little marker. In school, we learned about the difference between an eating disorder and just full on, and just a disordered eating,
Yeah.
right? And people usually associate that with women, females. But I've seen, like, I've had it myself, like in terms of being an athlete and just worried about that strength to weight ratio. And I find that as educators, we get so into the numbers and we get so obsessed with like the process of doing it that we kind of go a little extreme sometimes, right?
Yeah. And that was definitely what happened with me. And then I realized, this was not okay. And it was actually really hard for me to stop. Because then you see the numbers start to climb.
Yeah. Oh, and you get you had the sense of progress every day when you saw it cutting, and then it bites back 10 times harder when you see it rise again.
Yeah. And like now, like, I'm back up. I'm technically classified as overweight again. And, that's really hard for me. It's like definitely like toying with my mentality and about like how I feel about myself, because I was very successful. There was about 2 years there where I felt really good about like, how I look, how I felt. And, now like I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I've put some weight back on, for a number of reasons. And like, you could argue, so, well, that's not really a reason. It's like, yeah, well, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
And,
Well, even just teaching, like when like I find it hard to be in any sort of calorie or energy deficit when you're trying to perform all day, right? And the stress that goes on with that, and sometimes you just need like dopamine or serotonin. So the snacks are there to help, like with like it's a balance between mental health.
or if you're stressed,
Yeah.
right? Like I know I'm a stress eater.
Yeah.
I'm an anxious eater. So like food is a comfort for me,
Right.
which is, not a great place to if you're constantly stressed and under stress or have high cortisol.
Yeah. And like I know that, like, again, this is that whole cognitive dissonance thing. Like we are trained to be healthy.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just don't follow it. So how did you change your mindset? Because I see you in the gym now almost every single morning.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it all sort of started with an injury. That really sort of changed a lot of perspective for me. Because I couldn't move, and it was really hard to move in the way that I wanted to, or the way that I had lost, and at least in the way that I had initially lost all that weight, right? I did it with body exercises, and calorie counting, right? So now I lost my ability to do all my body weight exercises because of my shoulder injury. And that was really hard for me. And, I've got a number of injuries that I was like, oh, like I can't run because I have a metal rod in my leg from two pretty traumatic like leg breaks when I was a young adult / teenager. So it's like, how do I do this, right? My leg hurts when I run. I can't lift weights the way that I want. What can I do? I didn't have access to a bike. I can't afford a gym membership. So like, what do I do here, right? And that was really hard. And that's when the weight like started really to come on. And then, yeah, like something had to give and something had to change. So
like now, like I feel like once you get out of that, you realize like that just showing up is like the number one thing now. Instead of looking at the numbers now, what I find, you're just focusing on the routine, just doing the same stuff over and over again, not looking at the dips and valleys day to day, week to week. You're just following a consistent schedule of working out, exercising, whatever
Yep.
way you can,
Yeah.
right? And looking for those long-term gradual goals now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's ultimately where I'm at right now. I'm at a place where, like, yes, the numbers over the last 2 years have steadily increased on the scale, but it's
Because weight is a marker, but it's
yeah,
not the only
it's not
marker.
the only marker, right? Like,
Body composition, you're getting stronger.
yeah, like I
Sure.
I would argue that, like, my lower body is quite strong. My upper body is weak, but yeah, so it's just like showing up and having that consistency. Um, so like right now it's just kind of like in a maintenance phase where I'm just trying to like maintain or like gain fitness in other areas so that I can slowly start to eventually get myself to a point where I can eventually lose weight because, like I said, I've got young children. I don't want to be overweight. We live in a very sedentary culture,
Yeah.
so I want to be moving, and I want to show my kids that too, right? Like that's a value that I want my children to have because that's not something that I had growing up, right? You know, I mean, both my dad was an elite athlete at one point, but then really like steeply fell off the wagon.
The metabolism slows down eventually, folks.
Yes, metabolism does slow down, but
Yeah.
also, I mean, a pop and chip diet doesn't help either.
Right, yeah. And then, like, yeah, we carry those on from our
Yeah.
family. And, I think luckily, like university and stuff, you're exposed to
Mhm.
different people that sort of help evolve your family culture as you go. Like, it's always a progressively, like your culture that you bestow upon your kids are a mixture of your life experiences,
Mhm.
but also your family's upbringing, right? No, that's really good. And I'm glad that you're on like a road to being healthier. And I'm glad that you've found some sort of balance of doing extracurriculars, taking care of yourself, and being in the classroom. We are running out of time.
Yeah.
So I have a little activity for you.
Okay.
And then I have one more question to end the podcast. All right. So every podcast, I like to quiz some teachers on something of my specialty or something subject I teach. Now, this might be a little easy for you because you also teach the same stuff.
Okay.
But we are doing a pop quiz.
All right.
So I'm going to give you 5 questions.
It's almost like, are you smarter than an 8th grader?
Pretty much. Yeah,
Right.
exactly like that. So are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Which of the following statements is part of the particle theory of matter? Is it A, all substances are made up of different types of large solid blocks? Is it B, all matter is made up of tiny particles? Is it C, particles in a solid can move freely past each other? Or is it D, particles in a gas do not move at all?
It's B.
Final answer?
Final answer.
You're absolutely correct. Wow, it's not like you just taught this.
Yeah, that was the unit that we started the year off with. So
Question 2. Which type of mirror causes light rays to come together at a focal point? Is it A, a plane mirror, B, a concave mirror, C, a convex mirror, or D, a transparent mirror or surface?
causes light rays to converge. Oh, we're just doing this unit now. Concave.
Ding, ding, ding. That is correct. Concave.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 for 2.
Nice.
Question 3. Why does ice float on water? A, ice is heavier than water. B, ice is made of a different substance than liquid water. C, ice absorbs heat from water, making it lighter. Or D, ice is less dense than liquid water.
It's D. Ice is less dense.
Correct. Which is actually a really important part about life on Earth and
Yeah.
evolution, because
Yeah.
if it most of the time a solid state is denser than the liquid state.
Yeah, not in
Or
this case.
not in water.
No.
And that allowed ice to float
Yeah.
and insulate lakes and water reservoirs, and allowed life to grow and not die every winter.
Well, it also like allows helps to keep the planet cool, right? It allows that sun rays to come in and reflect back off into space and
yeah,
help.
the albedo of the Earth,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Awesome. We're on question 4.
Okay, do I get a prize?
Are we on question 4?
Yeah, wrong question.
Okay.
Do I get a prize if I get all 4 right?
Question 4. Which of the following is an example of a lever? A ramp, B, a screw, C, a seesaw, or D, a pulley?
Seesaw.
Correct. That was an easy one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Question 5. Which organelle is considered to be the post office of the cell? Is it A, the nucleus, B, the ribosomes, C, the mitochondrion, or D, the Golgi apparatus?
The Golgi apparatus.
Ding, 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 ding. That's good. That was a little more difficult than the mitochondria one.
A little bit. I had to pause for a second. Then he started listening. It's like, well, there's only.
Oh, it's the Golgi apparatus or the endoplasm.
Yeah, that was. I was like, okay, well, which one is he gonna give me?
Or
If he gives me both, well, I'm probably gonna be.
A common thing I would put on there is like a vacuole,
Yeah.
right, or something like that. So ding, ding, ding. I think you got 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
So you got 5 out of 5 on the quiz. That's awesome. I expect nothing less. Maybe next time you're on, I'll do like a film and media one.
Oh man, I would not do good at that one.
Ben Porter, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for the insights you gave me about, I guess, the transition from private school to public school, your teaching philosophy. I do this podcast because I want to gain insight on how to better help myself become a better teacher and a better human being in general.
Mm-hmm.
Before you go, I have one more question.
Sure.
What is one thing you want people to understand about your teaching profession that is not explicitly communicated in the media?
Yeah, that what we do is just not about a grade, in a grade book. It's so much more than that. Like we welcome every year these kids into our classrooms, and we watch them grow, and we see them go through struggles. We see them go through ups and downs, with curriculum, with their personal lives, with whatever they're going through. And it's such a pleasure to be a part of that. And I really enjoy that. That's one of the things I love most about being an educator, is just being able to be there for people's children. And to be, it's a privilege to be a part of all these kids' lives and to make an impact.
Very well said. Very positive. All right. Well, thank you, Ben. We have a long day of teaching ahead of us. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you for tuning in to Professional Development with me, Mr. Drover. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow educators. You can also connect with me on Instagram or via email to continue the conversation and share your thoughts. Well, until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference, both inside and outside the classroom. I'll see you in the next episode.